Do you recognize this man, the legend whose music stopped time and left all of Hollywood in awe? Was it Harry Belafonte, Ray Charles, Marvin Gaye? One of them carried a secret love so deep, so carefully hidden, that it was never revealed to the world until after his death. If you think you already know who it is, hit like right now and prove you're a true Hollywood superfan. If you're unsure, drop your guess in the comments before the truth comes out. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 16 secret love stories involving black celebrities, romances whispered behind closed doors, protected for decades from fans, cameras, and headlines. These weren't casual flings. They were lives lived in silence. Which story will shock you the most? Don't blink, because the truth behind the spotlight is about to change everything. Number 1. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston, born on August 9, 1963, in Newark, New Jersey, became one of the most iconic vocalists in music history. With a voice praised for its power and precision, she sold over 200 million records worldwide and delivered timeless classics such as I Will Always Love You and Greatest Love of All. Her achievements included chart domination, global fame, and 6 Grammy Awards. Yet behind the image of perfection was a private life marked by silence, restraint, and unspoken truths. In the early 1980s, as a teenager, Whitney met Robin Crawford while working at a community center in East Orange, New Jersey. Their friendship quickly deepened into an intense emotional bond. According to Crawford's 2019 memoir, A Song for You, My Life with Whitney Houston, their relationship eventually became romantic and physical. However, as Whitney's career began to rise rapidly, pressure from her family, management, and an image-driven music industry became overwhelming. Fearing public backlash and career consequences, Houston chose to end the physical aspect of their relationship. Despite this decision, Robin Crawford remained a constant presence in Whitney's life. She became her assistant, confidant, and later her creative director, standing by her side through fame, controversy, and personal struggles. Although their past was never publicly acknowledged by Houston, Crawford's loyalty never wavered. She was even chosen as maid of honor at Whitney's 1992 wedding to Bobby Brown. After Whitney Houston's sudden death on February 11, 2012, Crawford finally shared their story publicly. Her revelation sparked widespread discussion about the pressures of fame, rigid gender expectations, and the impact of homophobia in the entertainment industry. While their romance remained unspoken during Houston's lifetime, many now regard it as one of the most sincere and foundational relationships she ever had, one she chose to protect in silence until the very end. Number 2. James Baldwin. James Baldwin, born on August 2, 1924 in Harlem, New York, stands as one of the most formidable voices in American literature and social criticism. Through groundbreaking works such as Go Tell It on the Mountain, 1953, Giovanni's Room, 1956, and Another Country, 1962, Baldwin dissected race, sexuality, class, and identity with fearless honesty and rare intellectual precision. His essays and novels challenged America to confront truths it often preferred to ignore, making him a central figure in civil rights discourse. Yet despite his public boldness, Baldwin remained intensely guarded when it came to his personal life. Throughout his lifetime, Baldwin never publicly confirmed a romantic partner. He did not marry, nor did he have children. While his writing overflowed with themes of love, desire, and emotional vulnerability, particularly same-sex longing, he avoided naming or acknowledging a specific lover in public. His silence was not accidental. It reflected the heavy burden placed on a black gay intellectual navigating mid-20th century America and Europe. Only after Baldwin's death on December 1, 1987, in Saint-Paul-de-Vence, France, did fragments of a deeply private love story come into clearer focus. One of the most significant relationships of his life was with Lucien Happersberger, a Swiss artist 17 years younger than Baldwin, whom he met in Paris in 1949. Their bond was intense and formative, and for a period, Lucien lived with Baldwin in the south of France. Although Happersberger later married a woman in 1956, his emotional connection with Baldwin endured for years. Baldwin's final major novel, Just Above My Head, 1979, explores the inner lives of black gay men in America. Though fictional, its emotional depth mirrors Baldwin's own experiences, marked by devotion, secrecy, and the quiet ache of love lived largely in the shadows. Number 3. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye, born April 2, 1939, in Washington, D.C., was one of the defining voices of Motown and soul music. With timeless songs like What's Going On, Let's Get It On, and Sexual Healing, he infused popular music with rare emotional depth, blending social awareness with raw personal vulnerability. His artistry reflected not only the turbulence of his era, but also the inner chaos that shaped his private life. Gaye married twice, and both marriages were marked by conflict and instability. His first marriage was to Anna Gordy, the sister of Motown founder Berry Gordy. While the union initially strengthened his position within the Motown empire, it quickly deteriorated under the weight of emotional strain and Gaye's growing personal struggles. His second marriage to Janice Hunter was even more controversial. He met Janice in 1973, when she was just 17 and he was 34. Their relationship was intense and passionate, resulting in the birth of 2 children, including his son Frankie. Despite their closeness, the marriage was deeply unstable. Gaye's battles with addiction, depression, and chronic infidelity created constant tension. During his marriage to Janice, he carried on affairs with other women, continuing a long pattern of secret relationships that followed him throughout his career. Friends and biographers later suggested that Gaye often sought refuge in brief, hidden encounters, searching for emotional escape rather than lasting connection. Some accounts have also speculated that Gaye privately struggled with questions surrounding his sexual identity. However, there is no verified evidence of same-sex relationships, and such claims remain unproven and speculative. On April 1, 1984, one day before his 45th birthday, Marvin Gaye was fatally shot by his father during a family dispute. To the public, he was the master of love songs and sensual expression. Behind the scenes, he was a deeply troubled man, burdened by secrecy, longing, and an unfulfilled search for emotional peace. Number 4. Little Richard. Little Richard, born Richard Wayne Penniman on December 5, 1932 in Macon, Georgia, was one of the true pioneers of rock and roll. With explosive hits like Tutti Frutti, Long Tall Sally, and Good Golly, Miss Molly, he transformed popular music through wild vocals, pounding piano rhythms, and a flamboyant stage presence unlike anything seen before. His influence shaped generations of artists, from the Beatles to Prince, redefining what performance and self-expression could be. Behind the glitter and bravado, however, Little Richard struggled with deep internal conflict surrounding his sexuality and public image. Throughout his life, he spoke candidly, but often inconsistently, about his attraction to men. While he had relationships with women, and was briefly married to Ernestine Harvin in the late 1950s, he also engaged in numerous same-sex encounters. Many of these remained hidden, driven underground by fear of public backlash, cultural stigma, and his own intense religious guilt. One of the few romantic relationships acknowledged within his inner circle was with dancer Audrey Robinson, professionally known as Lee Angel. Their relationship began when she was 16 and lasted several years, though it was shaped by Richard's ongoing spiritual battles and evolving identity. Even this connection reflected the tension between his desires and his faith. Over the years, Little Richard frequently denounced his sexuality during periods of religious awakening, only to later reclaim it openly. At times, he described his orientation as sinful. At other moments, he openly identified as gay. These contradictions reflected a lifelong struggle between belief, fame, and personal truth, rather than simple confusion. Little Richard died on May 9, 2020 from bone cancer. Though he never settled into a traditional long-term partnership, he left behind a legacy far greater than music alone. His hidden romantic life reveals a deeply human side of a man who taught the world how to be bold, loud, and free, while privately carrying a silence he never fully escaped. Number 5. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr., born on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, stands as one of the most influential figures in modern history. As the moral voice of the American Civil Rights Movement, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and the architect of nonviolent resistance, his legacy is forever linked to justice, courage, and racial equality. His "I Have a Dream" speech remains one of the most powerful calls for human dignity ever delivered. To the public, King embodied moral clarity, spiritual discipline, and unwavering devotion to family and faith. In 1953, King married Coretta Scott, and together they built a family of 4 children while presenting a united image during one of the most turbulent eras in American history. Yet behind this carefully guarded public persona existed a private life far more complex. Extensive FBI surveillance, later declassified documents, and testimonies from individuals within King's inner circle suggest that he engaged in multiple extramarital relationships throughout his career. These revelations, long kept out of public discussion, have become part of the historical record. Among the most significant of these relationships was his close bond with Dorothy Cotton, an education director at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Cotton worked alongside King throughout the 1960s and played a crucial role in training activists and organizing nonviolent resistance. She frequently traveled with King during pivotal moments of the movement, becoming a trusted presence during periods of extraordinary pressure. According to colleagues and SCLC insiders, their relationship extended beyond professional collaboration, offering King emotional grounding during moments of exhaustion and isolation. Neither King nor Cotton ever publicly acknowledged an affair. However, multiple associates later confirmed the emotional depth of their connection, describing it as one of the most intimate relationships in King's private world. These accounts do not seek to diminish his achievements, but rather to reveal the human cost of carrying a nation's hopes. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on April 4, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee. In the decades since, discussions of his private life have continued, not to undermine his legacy, but to understand the full humanity of a man who bore historic responsibility while quietly managing personal struggles few ever saw. Number 6. Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor, born December 1, 1940 in Peoria, Illinois, was one of the most transformative figures in American comedy. A trailblazing comedian, actor, and writer, he reshaped stand-up with fearless honesty, turning personal pain into powerful storytelling. Pryor confronted race, addiction, trauma, and sexuality with a rawness that few performers dared to attempt. His groundbreaking work earned him 5 Grammy Awards and major film success in classics like Silver Streak and Stir Crazy. On stage, he appeared completely unfiltered, yet much of his private life remained hidden. Pryor was married 7 times to 5 different women and had 7 children. His relationships were often chaotic, shaped by drug addiction, emotional instability, and intense public scrutiny. His heterosexual affairs were widely known and frequently sensationalized. However, other aspects of his intimate life were rarely discussed while he was alive. Only after Pryor's death on December 10, 2005, did deeper layers of his story begin to surface. In 2018, Quincy Jones caused widespread debate when he publicly claimed that Pryor had a sexual relationship with actor Marlon Brando. The claim was later confirmed by Pryor's widow, Jennifer Lee Pryor, who stated that Richard was open about his bisexuality in private. She explained that he spoke freely about his experiences in personal diaries, which remain unpublished. According to Jennifer Lee Pryor, those writings describe multiple same-sex encounters, many taking place during the 1970s, a turbulent period when Pryor was experimenting heavily with drugs, identity, and self-expression. Although he never addressed these experiences publicly, his 1995 autobiography subtly hinted at internal conflict and personal exploration beneath the surface. Friends and colleagues later noted that Pryor was far more open in private conversations than his public image suggested. His humor may have been fearless, but certain truths remained offstage. Richard Pryor ultimately died of a heart attack after years battling multiple sclerosis. In the years following his death, fragments of his hidden life emerged, revealing a fuller portrait of a man who devoted his life to making others laugh while quietly carrying truths he never fully shared with the world. Number 7. Etta James. Etta James, born James Etta Hawkins on January 25, 1938, in Los Angeles, California, rose to become one of the most commanding and emotionally raw voices in American music history. With a rare ability to move effortlessly between blues, R&B, rock and roll, and gospel, she carved out a legacy defined by power, vulnerability, and truth. Songs like At Last, I'd Rather Go Blind, and Tell Mama showcase not only her vocal strength, but her ability to pour lived experience into every note, making her performances unforgettable. Yet behind the fearless stage presence and soul-bearing delivery was a deeply turbulent personal life. Etta James battled addiction, legal troubles, and emotional instability for decades, struggles that often unfolded away from the spotlight. Her most publicly known relationship was with artist Mills, whom she married in 1969. Mills served as both her husband and longtime manager, standing beside her through some of her darkest periods. Their relationship, however, was complicated, shaped by volatility, control, and the pressures of fame. Beyond this visible partnership, James carried emotional ties that remained largely hidden from the public. One of the most significant was her long-term connection with Harvey Fuqua, singer, producer, and co-founder of the Moonglows. Fuqua played a key role early in James's career, helping her secure a recording deal with Chess Records. While they were never publicly presented as a couple, multiple sources close to both artists, including colleagues from Chess, have indicated that their relationship extended beyond professional collaboration. Their bond endured quietly for years, even as Fuqua moved on to other ventures. James' reluctance to openly discuss her romantic life likely reflected both personal instinct and survival. As a black woman in the music industry during a highly judgmental era, public scrutiny could be unforgiving. Her ongoing battles with heroin addiction, repeated stints in rehab, and time spent in jail further destabilized her private world, making long-term openness difficult. Etta James passed away on January 20, 2012. While she is rightly celebrated for one of the greatest voices ever recorded, her life also reveals a woman who gave audiences everything on stage, while fiercely protecting her heart behind closed doors. Number 8. Paul Mooney. Paul Mooney, born on August 4, 1941, in Shreveport, Louisiana, was one of the sharpest and most fearless voices in American comedy. A stand-up comedian, writer, and cultural satirist, Mooney was renowned for his unapologetic critiques of race, power, and hypocrisy in American society. As a key writer for Richard Pryor, in Living Color and Chappelle's Show, he helped shape some of the most provocative and culturally impactful comedy of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. His humor was incisive, political, and deeply rooted in Black consciousness. Despite his bold public persona, Mooney's personal life remained almost entirely hidden. He never married and rarely spoke about romantic relationships. Throughout his career, he was consistently evasive when asked about his sexuality. For decades, rumors circulated within comedy circles suggesting that Mooney had relationships with both men and women, yet he never confirmed nor denied these claims, choosing silence over explanation. This deliberate privacy remained intact until his death on May 19, 2021, when he passed away from a heart attack at the age of 79. Even in his 2007 memoir, Black is the New White, Mooney maintained that boundary. While he briefly referenced his children and family background, He avoided discussing romantic partners or intimate relationships in any meaningful way. Friends and collaborators later suggested that Mooney's silence was a conscious decision. They believed he understood the realities of an entertainment industry and a broader society shaped by homophobia, especially during the early stages of his career. By guarding his private life so carefully, Paul Mooney ensured that his work, not speculation, defined his legacy. Number 9. Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker, born on June 3, 1906, in St. Louis, Missouri, rose from poverty to become one of the most extraordinary global icons of the 20th century. In the 1920s, her electrifying performances in Paris made her an international sensation, redefining entertainment with bold movement, charisma, and fearless self-expression. Yet Baker was far more than a performer. She was a civil rights activist, a World War II resistance agent, and a woman who consistently defied the limits imposed on her by race, gender, and nationality. Her courage was formally recognized when France awarded her the Legion of Honor for her work with the resistance. Publicly, Baker lived a life of spectacle and purpose. She married 5 times and adopted 12 children from different countries, forming what she proudly called her Rainbow Tribe, a living symbol of racial unity and coexistence. However, beneath this carefully presented image, Baker guarded her most intimate relationships with remarkable discretion. Throughout her life, Baker was involved in multiple same-sex relationships, though these connections remained largely unspoken during her lifetime and were often softened or omitted in later retellings of her story. One of the most frequently cited relationships was with Mexican artist Frida Kahlo. According to biographers and surviving correspondents, the two women shared a brief but passionate connection during Baker's visits to Mexico. While Baker never publicly addressed the relationship, accounts from contemporaries and Kahlo's well-documented romantic history support its authenticity. Baker was also romantically linked to figures such as French novelist Georges Simenon and famed architect Le Corbusier. These affairs were quietly known within Parisian artistic circles but never confirmed by Baker herself. She understood the power of mystery and chose silence over exposure. A master of reinvention, Josephine Baker blended activism with performance while fiercely protecting her private emotional world. She died on April 12, 1975, just days after a triumphant comeback concert in Paris. Even in death, she remains a symbol of resilience, brilliance, and carefully guarded truths, an icon who gave the world everything, yet kept part of herself hidden. Number 10. Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison, born Chloe Ardelia Wofford on February 18, 1931, in Lorain, Ohio, was one of the most influential writers of the 20th century. Through groundbreaking novels such as The Bluest Eye and Song of Solomon, she reshaped American literature by placing Black lives, memory, and identity at its center with unmatched poetic power. Her global impact was affirmed in 1993 when she became the first African-American woman to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature. Despite her towering public legacy, Morrison was intensely private about her personal life. In 1958, she married Jamaican architect Harold Morrison, and the couple had 2 sons before divorcing in 1964. After the separation, Morrison never remarried and rarely spoke publicly about romance or intimate relationships. She drew a firm line between her work and her private world, refusing to let personal details overshadow her writing. Friends, scholars, and biographers have consistently noted that this discretion was intentional. Morrison believed that an artist's inner life should be expressed through their work rather than through public confession. While her novels explored love, desire, and emotional complexity in profound ways, she resisted turning her personal experiences into public narrative. In later years, biographical accounts and interviews with those close to her suggested that Morrison did have meaningful romantic relationships throughout her adult life. Some sources indicated relationships with men and reportedly at least one with a woman, though Morrison herself never confirmed any details. One friendship that sparked speculation was her close bond with author and cultural critic Fran Lebowitz. Their intellectual closeness led to discussion within literary circles, but neither ever acknowledged a romantic connection. Ultimately, Toni Morrison never publicly defined her sexuality or identified a partner after her divorce. Her silence reflected a lifelong conviction that her legacy should rest on her words, not her private relationships. Number 11. Zora Neale Hurston. Zora Neale Hurston, born on January 7, 1891, in Notasulga, Alabama, and raised in Eatonville, Florida, was a pioneering writer, anthropologist, and central figure of the Harlem Renaissance. Her most celebrated novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, 1937, captured the voices and inner lives of Southern Black women with lyrical force and emotional honesty. While Hurston devoted her work to preserving the stories of others, she remained deliberately guarded about her own life, especially her romantic relationships. Hurston married 3 times, yet none of her marriages endured. Each ended in divorce after only a few years, reflecting her strong independence and resistance to traditional expectations placed on women. Her most public marriage, to physician Herbert Sheen, dissolved in 1931. Beyond these formal unions, scholars and biographers have long suggested that Hurston had additional romantic attachments that were either undocumented or intentionally obscured. She left few personal writings that clarified these relationships, reinforcing the sense that privacy was a conscious choice rather than an accident. One of the most debated relationships in Hurston's life was her close bond with fellow writer Langston Hughes. The two collaborated creatively and shared a deep intellectual connection during the height of the Harlem Renaissance. Their partnership ended abruptly in the early 1930s, following personal and artistic disagreements. Over time, some have speculated that romantic tension may have contributed to the fallout, though no definitive evidence has ever confirmed this. Hurston died on January 28, 1960, in near poverty and obscurity, and was buried in an unmarked grave. It was not until the 1970s that Alice Walker helped recover and honor her legacy. Today, while Hurston's literary importance is firmly established, her private life remains an enduring mystery, marked by independence, quiet defiance, and emotional bonds she chose never to fully reveal. Number 12. Nina Simone. Nina Simone, born Eunice Kathleen Waymon on February 21, 1933, in Tryon, North Carolina, was a legendary singer, pianist, and activist whose music became a powerful voice for civil rights and resistance. Classically trained yet fiercely unconventional, she blended jazz, blues, gospel, and classical music into performances that were emotionally raw and politically uncompromising. On stage, Simone was fearless. Off stage, her life was far more guarded and painful. One of the most damaging chapters of her life was her marriage to Andrew Stroud, a former police detective who became her manager. Their relationship was turbulent and abusive. Stroud tightly controlled Simone's career and finances and subjected her to domestic violence, truths Simone later revealed in interviews, and in her 1991 autobiography, I Put a Spell on You. The emotional and psychological scars from this marriage followed her for decades, deeply affecting her ability to trust and form intimate connections. After their divorce in the early 1970s, Simone lived a restless, nomadic life, spending time in Liberia, Switzerland, Barbados, and France. During this period, she kept her personal relationships largely private. Biographers and close friends have acknowledged that Simone had romantic relationships with both men and women, though she never publicly defined her sexuality. One rumored relationship involved a female activist she met while living abroad, but details remain scarce due to Simone's insistence on privacy. In private writings and unpublished letters, Simone reportedly expressed attraction to women, a dimension of her inner life that some scholars believe shaped the emotional depth of her music. Songs like Wild is the Wind and Do I Move You have since been reinterpreted as reflections of hidden longing and inner conflict. Nina Simone died on April 21, 2003, in France. While her public life was marked by artistic bravery and political defiance, her deepest emotional truths remained largely unspoken, carried instead through the haunting power and vulnerability of her music. Number 13. Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman, born July 6, 1949 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, was known for her stunning vocal range and emotionally charged performances. Her signature songs like You Know How to Love Me, Living All Alone, and Old Friend became staples in R&B and jazz during the late 1970s and 1980s. With a statuesque presence and unmatched stage charisma, Hyman captured the hearts of fans, but privately, she was battling demons that never made headlines until it was too late. Hyman struggled for years with bipolar disorder and chronic depression, conditions she masked behind a polished public image. In interviews, she occasionally alluded to loneliness and a longing for lasting love, but she kept specific relationships out of public discussion. Though she had several known relationships with men, including a brief marriage to her manager, Larry Alexander, details of her emotional life remained vague and deliberately obscured. In the years following her death, several close friends and collaborators confirmed that Hyman had romantic relationships with both men and women. One such relationship was reportedly with a female songwriter she worked with during the peak of her career. While this romance was never acknowledged publicly by Hyman herself, friends described it as deeply meaningful, if ultimately strained by Hyman's emotional instability and the pressure of secrecy in a judgmental industry. On June 30, 1995, just hours before she was scheduled to perform at the Apollo Theater, Hyman died by suicide in her New York apartment. She was 45. Dusha vau ocean van train. Hoi veep, lesi ocean van high, va koon, hoot, hoon. Cow tu, cock, oo, coot, 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 oo, coot. Number 14. Sammy Davis Jr. Phyllis Hyman, born on July 6, 1949 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, was celebrated for her extraordinary vocal range and emotionally rich performances. With signature songs like You Know How to Love Me, Living All Alone, and Old Friend, she became a defining voice in R&B and jazz during the late 1970s and 1980s. Tall, elegant, and commanding on stage, Hyman radiated confidence and sophistication, captivating audiences wherever she performed. Yet behind the glamorous image was a woman fighting private battles that rarely reached the public eye. For much of her life, Hyman struggled with bipolar disorder and chronic depression, conditions she carefully concealed beneath a polished exterior. In interviews, she occasionally spoke of loneliness and a longing for lasting love, but she avoided discussing specific relationships. While she had several known relationships with men, including a brief marriage to her manager Larry Alexander, details about her emotional life remained intentionally vague. Only after her death did a more complex picture begin to emerge. Friends and collaborators later confirmed that Hyman had romantic relationships with both men and women. One particularly meaningful relationship was reportedly with a female songwriter she worked closely with during the peak of her career. Though Hyman never acknowledged this romance publicly, those close to her described it as deeply emotional but strained by her mental health struggles and the pressure to remain discreet in a judgmental music industry. On June 30, 1995, just hours before she was scheduled to perform at the Apollo Theater, Phyllis Hyman died by suicide in her New York apartment. She was 45 years old. Today, she is remembered not only for her timeless music and majestic voice, but also as a profoundly sensitive artist who gave the world songs of love and longing while quietly carrying pain she could never fully escape. Number 15. Octavia Butler. Octavia Butler, born on June 22, 1947, in Pasadena, California, was a pioneering voice in speculative fiction and a trailblazer who transformed science fiction from the inside out. As the first African-American woman to gain widespread recognition in the genre, she challenged readers with groundbreaking works such as Kindred 1979, Parable of the Sower 1993, and the Patternist series. Her writing confronted race, gender, power, and survival with bold imagination and moral clarity, often reflecting the deepest questions of human existence. Despite the emotional and relational depth of her fiction, Butler remained intensely private in her own life. She never married, had no known children, and rarely spoke about romantic relationships. Interviews, journals, and archival materials reveal little beyond her unwavering discipline and devotion to writing. Friends and scholars have noted that Butler lived a largely solitary life by choice, not isolation, a deliberate rejection of social expectations rather than a sign of loneliness. In a 2000 interview, Butler openly discussed her introversion and discomfort with fame, but avoided any mention of intimacy or partnership. Writing remained her central commitment. After her death on February 24, 2006, speculation arose about whether she had ever shared a long-term emotional bond. Some biographers cited anecdotal accounts suggesting she may have had deeply private relationships, including at least one possible same-sex connection. However, no partner was ever publicly identified, and Butler left behind no memoirs or correspondence confirming romantic involvement. In both life and legacy, Octavia Butler remained an enigma, an author who revealed profound truths about humanity through fiction, while quietly guarding the most personal parts of her own story. Number 16. Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross, born on April 20, 1951, in New York City, became the defining voice of romance for an entire generation. With velvet-smooth vocals and impeccable control, he transformed love songs into emotional experiences. Classics like Here and Now, A House Is Not a Home, and Dance with My Father helped him sell more than 40 million records worldwide, earn 8 Grammy Awards, and secure his place as one of the greatest vocalists in American music history. His voice conveyed intimacy, devotion, and longing with unmatched elegance. Yet while Vandross sang about love with extraordinary vulnerability, he kept his own personal life firmly out of public view. He never married and never publicly acknowledged a romantic partner. Throughout his career, speculation about his sexuality followed him, but Vandross consistently deflected such questions in interviews. In a 2001 conversation with Vibe magazine, he briefly spoke about experiencing loneliness at times, but carefully avoided discussing his sexual orientation or private relationships. Only after his death did clearer truths emerge. Following his passing on July 1, 2005, close friends and collaborators, including songwriter Bruce Vilanch and producer David Guest, confirmed what many had long suspected: Luther Vandross was a gay man who chose not to come out publicly. According to those closest to him, his decision was rooted in fear that openness might damage his career, particularly within the traditionally conservative R&B industry and among his predominantly female fan base. Despite the absence of publicly known partners, Vandross poured profound emotion into his music. His 2003 hit Dance with My Father, which won the Grammy Award for Song of the Year, was one of his most personal recordings, honoring his late father. Beyond that tribute, many of his love songs, filled with yearning, restraint, and quiet heartbreak, have since been re-examined as reflections of a man who understood love deeply but lived it privately. Luther Vandross died at age 54 from complications related to a stroke. His artistic legacy remains untouchable, yet there is a poignant contrast between the love he so freely gave the world through music and the love he never felt free to claim in his own life. And now we turn it over to you. Which of these hidden love stories shocked you the most? Which ones do you think the public still isn't ready to accept? When fame enters the picture, does privacy disappear, or should celebrities still be allowed to protect their personal lives? There are no easy answers, and that's exactly why your voice matters. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let the conversation begin. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the secrets behind the spotlight, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Gazeon, and turn on notifications. More untold truths, powerful stories, and eye-opening revelations are coming next.